Hello everyone, my name is Carlos. I'm a game developer, photographer, and watch enthusiast. And today I'm going to give you guys my long-term review of the Seiko Presage GMT. So this particular Seiko Presage GMT line came out about 2 years ago, and about a year after it came out, I picked mine up on the gray market for about $1,000. If you go online right now, since they've been around for quite a long time, you can get some awesome deals on these True GMT watches. Now, one of the things that's cool is that when the Seiko GMT Presage came out, around that time, Mido also launched a very cool Ocean Star GMT that was about the same price range. So it really created this great sort of time where you could kind of compare Japanese versus Swiss True GMTs to see what was kind of the best offering for that particular price bracket. If you're interested to hear a little bit about the Mido GMT and how it compares to the Seiko Presage, please check out this video. So with that said, I've spent about 14 months wearing this GMT, and I'm telling you, this has not been a safe queen. I've definitely wore it a lot. I was lucky enough to be able to take it on a family trip to Los Angeles, and also I recently took it on a family trip to Portland. So it's definitely become one of those watches that I wear when I want to be a little bit more dressed up, still casual, but kind of business casual watch. And it's also a watch that I really enjoy taking traveling because of the dual time zone GMT feature. Now, one thing that I think is pretty special about this watch is that for the price range of $1,000, you get a True GMT, because you can get other GMTs that are cheaper and you can get GMTs that are more expensive, but it's crazy because a lot of the entry-level GMTs are actually color GMTs, which basically means that instead of having a jumping hour hand when you adjust that second time zone, they actually have basically like a jumping GMT hand. And so those movements are basically not as complicated and they're a lot more common. And it's pretty crazy because it's basically kind of from a horological standpoint, a somewhat less impressive movement, but you will find it on GMTs that are up to $2,000. It's pretty nuts. Until recently, the only True GMT movements that you could find were over $3,000 in brands like Longines and Tudor. Those were kind of like the two sort of really well-known entry-level True GMT watches, and that was really only on the Swiss side. Seiko did have True GMT spring drives on their Grand Seiko collection, but those are $5,000 and above. Like, those are very expensive watches. The promise of the Seiko GMT Presage was basically like an affordable Grand Seiko. It has very similar cues when it comes to like the details of the bracelet. It has this really amazing dial. So it really is supposed to bring sort of like all of the finesse and elegance and sort of high end of the Grand Seiko experience, but at a budget price with obviously some corners cut to make it happen. So 14 months after wearing this watch on a pretty regular basis, like, what are my thoughts about this watch? I have to admit, this is probably my favorite watch in my collection. It's not the one that I wear the most by any means, but it's definitely the one that when I want to put my best watch on, I usually reach for this Presage GMT. One of the things that I think makes this GMT super special is that for $1,000 is pretty much the only 4 Hertz Seiko movement watch that you're probably gonna find brand new. The 4 Hertz nub in me definitely likes that part. The fact that it's a True GMT makes me feel like people that don't know about watches but buy very expensive watches will never be able to appreciate a watch like this, because they don't understand how rare it is to find a movement that is really high quality, that is a True GMT complication, is 4 Hertz, and carries a Seiko logo. So from that standpoint, when you look at the overall package of the movement itself, it's definitely something that's great for watch nerds. The other thing that I really loved about this watch is the face. Not only does it have that really cool pattern that almost looks three-dimensional and stamped, but it almost looks like it has a glaze over it that flattens the dial and gives it a little bit of extra shine that, like, it just looks really elegant elegant and really beautiful. With that said, while the Seiko Presage is elegant, like it's not so elegant that I can't throw it on with a pair of jeans and a t-shirt. I think the size has been a really great size for my wrist. I have 8-inch wrists, so I feel like this fits really, really great on my wrist in its current size. Maybe a little bit thick, but you know, it's nothing that can't still make it through like a shirt cuff if that's something that you're into. So now, while I love this watch and this watch has become kind of the crown jewel of my collection, it's not a perfect watch. The places where you start seeing that Seiko cut corners to make this watch a reality, I think the bracelet is the first place. It doesn't have a lot of great adjustability. Like the clasp is very small, which is nice and elegant, but that also means that it doesn't have any micro adjustment holes. That means that you have to use the links strategically to try to get as close as a perfect fit. And for me, I always struggle between it feeling a little too loose and a little too tight. So I've kind of voted towards being a little too tight. Since I wore the bracelet a little too tight, I do feel that that's kind of over time affected a little bit the fit of the end links, because now when I look at the watch, like the links definitely feel just a tiny bit loose, and it's something that, while I still love the watch, you can definitely see like, oh, okay, this is not something that's like hand fitted or hand finished, like what you would expect from like a Grand Seiko, right? But once again, Grand Seiko costs 5 times what this watch costs. The last thing that is important to kind of point out about this watch that people might have questions about is actually the hard coating that Seiko used to make the finish last a little bit longer on the watch. And I have to admit that this watch for the most part has taken a pretty good beating just in regular wear. I've had it for much longer than my Mido, and the overall marks from like desk diving are a lot smaller and less visible on the Seiko than there are on the Mido. The Mido, I mean, about 2 weeks in, like it looked pretty bad. Like I would look at the bracelet and you can definitely see these big scratches on all of the polished surfaces. I think that the hardening coating in the Seiko does do a really good job of protecting the watch, but over a year I have put some scuff marks, so I don't want to give you the impression that that thing's gonna make it last forever. So, you know, those are all the things that I love about this watch. As I said, it's kind of like the crown jewel of my collection. It's the watch that, even though I have more expensive watches and I have Swiss watches and I have chronographs, where I really feel like wearing something special, something that I know is awesome, I kind of always reach for the Presage. However, it's not a perfect watch. There's things about it that, you know, you can definitely see where Seiko cut corners to basically be able to bring you something that is so awesome, yet at such an affordable price. The first thing would be, like, the movement is not the most accurate movement. I'm getting about 10 plus seconds a day. So compared to other more expensive watches, you would expect this to run under 5 seconds a day. So this one, just know you're not gonna get anything that's like super amazing accuracy watch, but you know, it's plenty good. Like you can wear this watch for about a week without having to like readjust it or worry about it telling you the wrong time. So it's still a super accurate watch. It's just important to know that, like, if you're the type of person that really gravitates towards high accuracy watches and you want a watch that's under 5 seconds or plus 5 seconds a day, I can definitely be like that sometimes. The Presage is probably not gonna meet those expectations. Now, I haven't tried to regulate this watch. It's very possible that I could probably regulate it and get it like a little bit closer, but this is the only watch in my collection that I love so much that I'm very timid about opening it up and actually like playing around with it. With that said, if something does happen to the movement of your watch, as far as I can tell, Seiko charges about $300 to put a new movement on your watch. So it is pretty serviceable and you can get another movement if you go through Seiko. The other kind of downside of the watch is that even though it has anti-reflective, I think that really glossy dial creates reflections inside of the watch that can affect readability. So sometimes when you're outside on a sunny day, like in the park or taking a hike, it can be a little hard to read the watch. Not super hard, don't get me wrong. It's not as bad as like maybe a skeletonized watch, but just know that the watch is definitely very reflective, especially comparing it to something like that Mido Ocean Star GMT that has almost no reflections on the glass. With that said, I think that that the awesome dial more than makes up for any extra reflection that it might cause that might affect legibility. Like, it's just a great looking watch. The other downside, I think, to this watch is the date. The date is just used as like a little lollipop hand to tell you the date, and honestly, my aging eyes, I cannot read the date. However, like, I'm pretty meticulous about always setting the date on my watches, even if I can't read it. So it's one of those things where like I usually have to either use my reading glasses or I have to use like my watchmaker loop to actually set the date and be able to see that I'm setting it correctly. However, the power reserve indicator, I think, is something that is amazing, and I wish that all my watches had it. Like, I love not having worn this watch for a while and really quickly like start winding it and see that power indicator go to full and know that I've like completely wound my watch right before I set the time and I put it on. So that's a part that's really awesome. So I think that those are kind of all the pros and cons for me. I absolutely do not regret buying this watch. I think for the money, it's better than anything that I've seen Swiss-wise. I definitely think that it's better than the Mido. I think that the movement finish on the Seiko is really good. If you look at it under magnification, you can tell the difference in finishing for this GMT movement than like your typical NH35. Like, the bridges have bevels, they're polished, the rotors are just that much more crisper. Like, you can tell that this movement is a higher end movement than your typical NH35. So that's pretty much it, guys. Tell me, do you guys own the Sharp Edge GMTs? Are you guys thinking about getting one? What do you guys think about being able to get a True GMT for $1,000 and still have brands that are selling color GMTs for twice as much, $1,500, $2,000? Like, what do you guys think about that? Anyways, let me know in the comments. As usual, please hit like, please subscribe to the channel. I'm a pretty new channel, so every little bit that you guys do helps me a ton. And from your comments, I also learn how to make these videos better. So, as I said, please leave me a comment, like, subscribe, all of that good stuff. And hopefully, I will see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.